So, welcome everyone, and it's good to see you all here today. Refreshing rain and blessedly cooler temperatures today. So last week we talked about Kangxi, the bathhouse attendant, who turned her bathhouse into a temple. And the section of the Genjo Koan we're going to be talking about today, I think the whole Genjo Koan really has something to do with looking at things differently, making a perceptual shift. So we'll start with the text here. I hope that's sharing. We'll see. Firewood becomes ash, and it does not become firewood again. Yet do not suppose that the ash is future and the firewood is past. You should understand firewood abides in the phenomenal expression of firewood, which fully includes the past and future and is independent of past and future. Ash abides in the phenomenal expression of ash, which fully includes future and past. Just as firewood does not become firewood again after it is ash, you do not return to birth after death. If a person, This being so, it is an established way in Buddha Dharma to deny that birth turns into death. Accordingly, birth is understood as no birth. It is an unshakable teaching in Buddha's discourse that death does not turn into birth. Accordingly, death is understood as no death. Birth is an expression complete, this moment. Death is an expression complete, this moment. They are like winter and spring. You do not call winter the beginning of spring, nor summer the end of spring. Well, that's a little bit of a mind twister. It's one of those passages that calls on our faith in Master Dogen. That he's not trying to confuse us, he's trying to communicate something that might not be easy to communicate. And he's using various images. He's using the image of firewood and ash. he also talks about birth and death. There are different ways to obviously interpret this, and I think that Dogen, being a poet, would expect that people would look at his words from various perspectives, that there is not just one right way to state what he's talking about, but the writing is designed to open our mind to various perspectives. So David Brazier, who wrote a book on the Genjo Koan and Carol and I have studied with, thinks that Firewood is a stand-in for ordinary mind, for delusion, and that ash is a stand-in for awakening. And this passage is about the difference between delusion and awakening, enlightenment. Well, that may be true, and I think that is one fruitful way of looking at this passage. But why does Dogen bring in the birth and death? First of all, birth. The character that's used for birth, there's an ambiguity between birth and life. So some people translate this as life and death, not birth and death. We think of birth as being sort of a moment in time, but life being an extended interval. And I think the character takes in both. So you could think about it in terms of life and death, not birth and death. And if you were going to insist on the delusion awakening interpretation, you would think about death actually as not being a negative thing, but actually being the dropping away of wayward passions. And life being samsara, birth, life, samsara, just the consequence of the continual cycle of wayward passions. But I think it's helpful to actually think about this passage from various perspectives. The portion that is, let me just share this once again real quickly. The phrase that's used here, phenomenal expression, you should understand that firewood abides in the phenomenal expression of firewood, and ash in the phenomenal expression of ash. That phrase, phenomenal expression, I am told is more literally translated as Dharma position. Dharma position, which I think is a rich concept. Tanahashi explains Dharma position this way. He says, it's the unique, non-repeatable stage of a thing's existence at any given moment. The unique, non-repeatable stage of a thing's existence at any given moment. Well, this all sounds kind of heady and conceptual, but I think it's he's talking about something very immediate here and something very practical. To try to abide in the Dharma position where you find yourself. Just as Kangxi abided in the Dharma position of being a bathhouse attendant during that stage of her life. So it brought to mind an episode that I'll recount. It was several years ago, probably at least 15. I was working at St. Joseph's Hospital and had, in the morning, early morning, performed a surgical procedure on someone who was about halfway through her pregnancy. Having, of course, thought it through and concluded that the benefits of the procedure outweighed any risks. Well, around noontime, I got a call from the nurse saying that the person I had operated on was in intense pain, intense lower abdominal pain, crying out. So that got my attention, and I got up from the desk and went. Well, in order to get from the office to the room where she was, you have to go over to the hospital building, and you have to go down some steps and up some steps. And as I was going down some steps, I was thinking about all of the awful things that might be happening. That, maybe there was bleeding in the uterus. There was an abruption. The placenta may have separated. There may just be intractable labor, and whatever procedure I had done would have to be taken down, and the pregnancy would be lost. And which brings to mind the experiences of seeing people lose pregnancies and the painful emotions that are a part of that process. And all that was sort of spinning through my mind. But then a phrase popped into my head, and it was actually the title of the Carol's Heartland Zen resource directory. Start here. Start here. So what? And again, I'm going downstairs and upstairs to all this is going through my head, but I'm thinking, well, I don't really know what's going on. It could be all of these things. It could be something else. So there was this movement from this sort of oh no mind to the don't know mind. The oh no mind of the catastrophizing, thinking, oh no. And the don't know mind of, well, we'll have to see, gather information and see what's happening and try to address it as best we can, starting from here. So that movement of mind from the oh no mind to the don't know mind was very calming. Whatever's happening will need to be dealt with. We don't know what it is yet. So I think to me, I relate that to coming back to one's Dharma position. Where are you right now? What is happening? Now, that being said, I think that catastrophizing mind that I was thoroughly trained in. I remember the first few nights, one of the first few nights I was on call for labor and delivery at Barnes Hospital, as a starting resident. I had no idea what I was doing, but at that time, starting residents were given a wide degree of latitude, even though they didn't know what they were doing. But a third-year resident gave me some advice. He said, "Okay, in any given situation, when something comes up, just imagine the worst thing that could possibly happen and prevent that." That was his rule of thumb. Just imagine the worst thing that could possibly happen and be sure you prevent that. Well, actually, it's more complicated because there are a whole range of worse things that can happen, and they require a number of preventative measures. But nonetheless, I think you get the drift. It's that catastrophizing mind, that mind that looks into the future about all the things that could go wrong, can have some value because, indeed, it does allow one to prepare in some sense for things that might happen. But it also can be completely paralyzing and make one entirely paranoid. So it's helpful to make that shift and let firewood be firewood, and let ash be ash. And yes, firewood has its past and its future, and it's all included, but it occupies the Dharma position of firewood. Let it be firewood. Let children be children. Let adults be adults. So there's another passage from Dogen which is not too long. I just love it, so I'm going to read it because I think it, in a way, restates what Dogen is trying to tell us in a slightly different way. It is a mistake to suppose that birth turns into death. And again, this birth can be translated as life. It is a mistake to suppose that birth turns into death. Birth is a phase that is an entire period in itself, with its own past and future. For this reason, in Buddha Dharma, it is understood as beyond birth, or no birth. Death is a phase that it is an entire period into itself, with its own past and future. For this reason, death is understood as beyond death, or no death. In birth, there is nothing but birth. In death, there is nothing but death. Accordingly, when birth comes, face and actualize birth. When death comes, face and actualize death. Do not avoid them or desire them. This birth and death is the life of a Buddha. If you try to exclude it, you will lose the life of a Buddha. If you cling to it, trying to remain in it, you will also lose the life of a Buddha. And what remains will be the mere form of a Buddha. Only when you don't avoid birth and death, or long for it, do you enter a Buddha's mind. However, do not analyze or speak about it. Just set aside your body and mind. Forget about them. throw them into the house of the Buddha. Then all is done by the Buddha. When you follow this, you are free from birth and death, and become a Buddha without effort or scheme. Who then remains in the mind? There is a simple way to become a Buddha when you refrain from unwholesome actions and are not attached to birth and death, and are compassionate toward all sentient beings, respectful to seniors and kind to juniors, not excluding or desiring anything, with no thoughts or worries. You will be called a Buddha. Seek nothing else. So I think I'll stop there, and I guess questions come up about, whether there have been times that you can recall when there has been this perceptual shift back to where you are right now. What is happening right now? Out of sort of the realm of the past, out of the realm of the future, into this. Are there ways of sort of triggering that shift when it's needed? Are there phrases that you might use? So I think we'll stop there, and maybe go ahead and split into smaller groups to discuss this or anything else that comes up, and I'll see you shortly.